I remember the dates.
Oh dear.
They're 5 and 3, and they'll be joining us at the beach this Sunday again.
Tired. I bet you the parents are looking
But
forward to it.
well, when we went out to visit, you know, the parents
That's just, we all have our stuff.
then we went to Pebble Beach for a couple of days. You know.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, right. That's fine with us.
Halfway?
From the camera.
Oh, dear. When we get to the live area, the gentlemen are going to help us place it. Put it on the rollers and pass it forward and don't let go until you are instructed to do so.
Step up on the board right there.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you.
Whoops, you're right. We don't want you to.
If there's a hole, I'll find it.
No. Yeah.
Lower it down. So Rick, you just stay standing and Lisa for one more moment, just right here. Everyone else can sit, but the three of you I need. Okay. And that is because you're wearing this ribbon, and Eve, you have a ribbon on also. We put it on earlier. And the reason why we have this ribbon is because in our tradition, when we heard the news of death, that we tore our clothes, and we still do it to this day. In some more traditional elements of Judaism, you literally tear your clothing. This is a replacement for your clothing, so that means that when you put on a new garment, you take the ribbon and pin it to your new garment. This, by the way, this was so many examples in the Bible, it's like I don't even know where to start. King David, when he heard the news of his son's death, he tore his clothes. Jacob, when he heard the news of Joseph's death, he tore his clothes. Job, when he heard the news of his family's death, he tore his clothes, and we do it as well. There's a blessing that we say, and I'll help you with the blessing in just a minute. And some people oftentimes ask me, like, how long you should keep this ribbon on for. like 7 days, 30 days. Those are two customary ideas. I like to think of the ribbon in the same way that you think of your hazard lights in your car when you're driving. If you're having a hard time in your car with your car on the highway and you put your hazard lights on, no one complains if you're driving 30 miles per hour on the highway. They know that you're struggling and that you go around. You take your hazard lights off and you're driving 30 miles per hour on the highway, then obviously then people are yelling at you. When you're struggling in your life because of the loss of a loved one, this is your way of signaling to people that says, hey, I'm not functioning at my best right now, and I need you to understand that about me. So by taking the ribbon off does not mean you are no longer sad, and it does not mean that you have forgotten or that you're fine. It just means that you no longer need people to experience you to take care of you. And so when that happens, you can take your ribbon off. So the blessing is, Eve, what you need to do is you're going to need to unzip your jacket a little bit so you can get to that ribbon of yours. It's the zipper's a little hot. There you go. And hers should be on the other side. There you go. I see it right there.
Yeah, let me have my bag first, so I can keep this stuff.
Take your time. Okay. So Eve, are you ready to say the blessing with me? Or do you need another minute? You ready?
Is it in the book?
No,
It's not in the book.
Oh,
it's not in the book. You're just going to repeat it, say it with me. The first few words you probably know. The last two words will be mildly unknown, and you'll just repeat them after me. Baruch atah Adonai. Try that.
Baruch
Adonai,
Dayan
Dayan,
ha'emet.
Ha'emet.
It means we praise you, Adonai, our God, for you are the true judge. Amen. So what you do is, now you want to make a tear into your ribbon. So don't tear it in half, just tear into it. And Eve, if you can do it, or you need someone to help you, they can help you do it too. Yeah, perfect. And I think we're ready to start. So I'm going to take, you can now you guys can sit if you want to. You don't have to, but just wanted to. I am taking my mask off because I'm going to stay at kind of a distance from everybody. My name is Rabbi Ari Goldstein. Thank you to those people who are watching. At some point, about 10 minutes ago, we had 11 people. Do you want to give us a sense of what we're up to right now?
It's probably twice that.
Twice that. So maybe, so my point to the people here is that imagine loved ones who are also watching on the video, who are here with you. We gather at this time and in this place to say goodbye to Bob. It was just a short time ago that he was walking the way with us and blessing us with his presence, and he's gone now, and we have to come to terms with that, and we have to recognize that this is how our world works. But at the same time, we also recognize that he blessed us with so much, and that we have the capacity to reflect on his life and the legacies that he leaves behind for us, and begin the process of granting him eternal life because of the way that we talk about him. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid. I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart rejoice, my soul exalts, my being is secure, for you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life, your presence brings fullness of joy, enduring happiness is your gift. That was Psalm 16. See, indeed, death has taken Bob. We grieve at this time. Lost in our sorrow and our struggle, may we find the presence of those around us, and of course those who are here with us by camera. For Bob's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that We share it along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and his mind which brought us joy and happiness, and which is now a precious memory. For all these and more we give our thanks to God. Psalm 1. It begins, Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach ba'atzat risha'im. Happy is the one who has not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is his delight, and he studies that teaching day and night. He's like a tree planted beside a stream of water that yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, and whose fruit always flourishes. And there's the most well-known psalm of them all. Is Psalm 23. It's the one that speaks of God as a shepherd. You want to help zipping that up? Is that I'm gathering? Oh, you got it. You got it. Nice. That's not the same as me suggesting that people pull the wheelchair out from under you, which I did not say, by the way. I did not say that. Psalm 23 is the one that talks about God as a shepherd, right? And what's beautiful about this psalm is how it speaks to us on various different levels. One level it speaks to us is on the level of perhaps God is a shepherd for us as we're living, and the other level is perhaps God is a shepherd for us when we're dead. And why that's meaningful is because it helps connect us with Bob, because he's not with us at this moment for sure, but we are still sharing the same shepherd. And so we are connected still, to be sure. Psalm 23 in Hebrew goes like this. Adonai ro'i lo echsar bin ot desha yarbitzeni al me menuchot yinachaleni nafshi yeshovev yancheni v'ma'aglei tzedek l'ma'an shemo gam ki elech begates amavet lo irara ki ata imati shivtecha u'mishantecha ema yinachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan neged sororai tishanta v'shemen roshi kosi rivaya Ach tov v'chesed yerdefuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti b'veit Adonai l'orech yamin. If you know this, please feel free to join me. My guess is that it's in this booklet too. It is on page 25, is that what you said? Yep, it is on page 25, if you want to follow along in this book. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. A poem, this one written by a rabbi named Alvin Fine, probably about 75 years ago, but a beautiful poem about life and about death, and it goes like this. Birth is a beginning, and death is a destination, but life is a journey, a going and a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage. Birth is a beginning, and death is a destination, but life is a journey, A sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. And let me share with you one last message and expression from our tradition, at least for the time being. It's about Job, and maybe you've heard of Job. I mentioned Job shortly ago with respect to when we tore the ribbon. Job was a sad story in the Bible, a terrible and sad story. Here was a man who was happy, and he had a family, and he had possessions, and he had a home, and he had a farm, and he honored God, and God knew it. And at some point, God says, hey, look at my subject Job over there. Look at how faithful he is to me. And someone said to God rather, yeah, that's just because he has everything. If you take everything away, I'm sure that he won't be nearly as faithful. And God says, I'm certain he'll be faithful, and I'll show you. And so God takes away everything. Takes away Job's family and his possessions and his health and his home and everything. And in his sorrow and in his despair, Job cries out. He says, Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mivorach. And those words mean, God is given and God is taken away. Blessed be the name of God. We are an ancient people well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death, sorrow, they are not strangers to us. And yet, the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave. And also that there's strength in faith. With Job, and like Job, we say, Adonai Natan, God, you have given. You gave us Bob, a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in his life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. And yet, like Job, we also say, Adonai Lakach. Oh God, you have taken away from us. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, and so hopefully we can all come to say, Hishem Adonai Mivorach, that despite the feelings that we're having now, the pain that we feel now, despite the feeling of loss, still, blessed be the name of God now and forever. So, there are a few people who are going to speak. Lisa, I think you're going to speak first, correct? I'm going to move over to the side, and again, just be careful as you're walking here.
Okay.
There's just because there's a ledge right there.
Oh, okay. Let me get that.
What?
Okay. Okay?
Yep.
Oh. Hi. Well, thank you for coming. My father loved commanding a room and making short speeches. Roasts and toasts were his specialty. I'd like to make some remarks was something we often heard at family gatherings. As the patriarch, I think he felt it was his duty to comment. He often peppered his remarks with a funny story. So in that vein, let me share this. Toward the end of his life, my father fell multiple times. The last time he fell, a paramedic came to the apartment, saw my dad on the floor, and asked, "What happened, sir?" To which my dad replied, "I went boom." I think the word boom captures the essence of who my father was. The definition of boom is to make a deep, prolonged, resonant sound. When my dad was in a room, he made his presence known, and his words reverberated. He was not, as he would say, a shrinking violet. He loved being in charge, and he had no shortage of opinions, which he shared freely. Often when I visited him, there was a moment when he would interrupt whatever I was doing and say in his thick New York mob boss accent, "Pull up a chair, I want to talk to you." He then offered his advice, whether solicited or not. That advice is his legacy. It's the part of him that will resonate in future generations. It's his boom. I must also add that not all aspects of his booming nature were positive. Sometimes it was more like the boom on a sailboat, the part of the boat that can clobber sailors in the head. Many of us were struck by this boom, momentarily knocked off kilter and disoriented. Dad's good friend and colleague at the Fed once called him Mount Vesuvius. You never knew when Bob's volcano was going to erupt. As I've aged, I've come to understand and have compassion for his volatility. His life was tough growing up. His father died suddenly and traumatically, and his mother had serious health issues. And exploding was how he learned to express his emotions. Like the rest of us, he was human and flawed. But his heart was in the right place, and he taught us to always strive to make the world better. My dad loved making lists, so I want to share some of the things I learned from him about improving the world in the form of a list. Typically, he organized his ideas as an agenda, enumerating his concerns, like the legal way of thinking. Number 1, number 2, number 3. And so in this spirit, here is a list of some of the wisdom that I gleaned from Bob Plotkin in no particular order. Number 1, teach your children to swim. The Talmud says that fathers are... Rick. That fathers are obligated not only to teach their children values, morality, and a sense of shared history, they must also teach them to swim. I don't know if my dad was aware of this teaching, but he definitely met the obligation, literally and figuratively. When we lived in Silver Spring, Maryland, he taught my brother and me to love the water at young ages. We spent many summer hours at our community pool, on the swim team, in the JCC pool on weekends, in the winter, as lifeguards, and Rick even spent a few summers as the manager of a swim club. These experiences taught us discipline, perseverance, and independence. My dad loved the ocean, finding it invigorating and relaxing, and it brought out his softer, more mindful side. Every summer, he took us to the Outer Banks of North Carolina, where we would body surf together, and he taught us to be confident in the rough surf. After swimming, we would sit on the beach and then take long walks, and he would pontificate about the world. After he retired to Annapolis, he especially delighted in swimming in his beloved backyard Plotkin pool, a personal oasis that glued the family together year after year. We spent countless hours there, hanging out, celebrating happy events, and feeling his love. Number 2, explore deep existential ideas and be a lifelong learner. My dad was a curious man, always reading, ordering obscure foreign DVDs from Netflix, and going to museums. He was committed to trying to master the computer, and hardly a day would go by without a phone call demanding that we put David on the line so his tech-savvy grandson could help him with some computer-related task. In the last email he sent me, Dad referenced astronomer Carl Sagan, who reminded us that humans are just tiny specks on a pale blue dot called Earth, and we need to take care of our planet and one another. I love that he was still pondering big ideas like this, even at the end of his life. Number 3, get an education and learn to write. My father went to the City College of New York and was a proud graduate of Columbia Law School. He worked as a lawyer at the Federal Reserve Board for 30 years, and much of his work involved writing and editing banking regulations. Writing was his superpower. Throughout his life, he sent letters to the editor, and they were published in many places, starting with the Saturday Evening Post when he was in high school, and most recently in the Washington Post. He was so proud of these letters, and he saved them all in a big file that he kept in his desk. Number 4, have compassion for the underdog and engage with your community. When my dad was growing up in the Bronx, he was sometimes bullied by other children because he was Jewish. This experience helped him develop a thick armor, but also gave him compassion for the underdog. He was attuned to their needs throughout his life and tried to help as he could. At the Fed, Dad spent a lot of time working on the Glass-Steagall Act, which was created after the Great Depression and separated commercial from investment banking. He also authored regulations to break up redlining banking practices that discriminated against minorities. He believed that government should be a force for good and that regulations should make America more just and fair. And his work on federal regulations reflected this conviction. He was also engaged in community, serving on various organizations such as the PTA, the Swimming Pool Board, and his neighborhood association. He read the newspaper religiously, sometimes several at once, and he paid close attention to politics. Number 5, be direct and honest. In his writing and relationships, my father spoke his mind. Let me be frank, or I don't want to sugarcoat this, were part of his everyday parlance. When Paul Volcker, the former chairman of the Fed, died, he said, "He was the best chairman I ever worked for. He was hard-nosed, honest, direct, didn't play politics, and always put the country's needs above his own." Even though he was speaking about Volcker, I felt he was describing himself. Number 6, engage with Judaism. Dad made it very clear that he saw the world through Jewish eyes and that being Jewish mattered. He always belonged to a synagogue and attended services when he could. He sent us to Hebrew school and he sent me to Israel twice. He was always exploring Jewish themes in books and movies, and the lawyerly part of him loved a good Talmudic-style debate. Number 7, get a dog. He loved his dog Shayna. Number 8, tell lots of jokes and laugh. He loved telling jokes and stories and watching good comedy, especially the old-time Jewish comedians. He said that his father was a cut-up, and at times so were my dad and his sister Irma. In the 1950s, he worked as a lifeguard in the Catskills, and legend had it that he shared a cabin with comedian Don Rickles. So maybe he had some professional mentoring. Number 9, travel and see the world. My dad loved traveling and thought it made people more interesting. A few years ago, my beautiful daughter Mira made a video of my parents that reflected this love of travel, of exploring and adventure. And you can see the video by going to YouTube and searching for Bob and Eve See the World, and you can watch them. And finally, number 10, know when enough is enough. My father hated long eulogies, and if he were here, oh no, he would be squirming in that seat, and he would throw up his hands and he would say, "Come on, Lisa, enough already." In recent years, he also said this about himself: "I had a good life, it's enough already." He did have a good life. We will miss you, Dad. May your memory be for a blessing.
Again, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching on Zoom. I'm Richard, Bob's son of 57 years, or Ricky, as I was remembered by the funeral director Dad chose, since Joyce Torchinsky went to school with my sister Lisa. I've gone by Rick for the past 35 years, but my dad never quite adjusted to Rick and usually called me Rich. So the theme of this tribute, don't tell Bob Plotkin what to do, he'll do it his way. Our family decided just last Friday to put Bob in comfort care to relieve his suffering. I arrived at the hospital at 11 p.m. after the nurse thought that he only had 12 to 24 hours to live. More than 72 hours later, Bob was still going. Since you don't tell him when it's time to go, he'll do it his way. So who was Robert S. Plotkin? A family man. Bob was a husband for 62 years, a father for nearly 60 years, a brother for 89 years, a brother-in-law, a grandfather for more than 20 years, 2 grandsons and a granddaughter, an uncle, cousin, and a friend to many. Because I like acrostic poems, I wrote this to break down his last name into his main qualities. P is for paper pusher, since that's how he described his job as Assistant Director of Banking Supervision and Regulation at the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. Fed was a big part of our family's life. Though he could have spent long hours to earn promotions, he decided early on to leave each day at 5 p.m. in order to be home for dinner with family. A work ethic he's passed on to me. In the 70s, the Fed meant to me getting to read the New York Times and Wall Street Journal newspapers he brought home as a perk of his job, but also annual trips to the rooftop on July 4th, just blocks from the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. In the 80s, the Fed meant the place where he made his mark in handling the fallout from the savings and loan scandal. So as Lisa said, just Google Glass-Steagall and Robert S. Plotkin, and I don't quite understand it, even though I was an econ major, but it's there due to the beauty of the big brain. He and I bonded about our parallel time in Foggy Bottom. When I'd closed down the 21st Amendment at 2 a.m. while doing the Rockettes dance to Frank Sinatra's New York, New York, while some 14 hours after he had just grabbed a burger, probably with his colleague Mike, there on his lunch break. In the 90s, it was the place we drove together for a year after I moved home while working at GW and getting my master's. So the Fed was the institution that gave him golden handcuffs to enjoy the last 13 years of his life his way. L is for laughter. My favorite memories were listening to my dad laugh while watching his favorite sitcoms like All in the Family, MASH, and Barney Miller, or movies like Young Frankenstein and Bananas. Later in life, I got lots of emails forwarded from him, as did many of us, with few, if any, messages, except for jokes or stories that tickled his funny bone and caused him to want to spread the cheer. I could hear his laugh when reading these emails, so we believed that laughter was indeed the best medicine. Despite many tough bumps in the road during his life, including the loss of both parents before he was 35, laughter, among other things, kept him going much longer than any of us expected. Because you don't tell Bob what's funny, even if it wasn't politically correct, he'll do it his way. O is for opportunity. My dad's dad, Harris, after whom I take my middle name, always told my dad that he wanted to give him a better life than he had. And in turn, my dad wanted to give me a better life than he had. And a good life we both had. As you heard, our family visited every state from Maine to Florida when we were young, but every summer we were back at the Outer Banks. It was really one of the places that my dad was relaxed. And it's the reason the beach is still one of my favorite places to get away to. When it was time to apply to college, he told me I could go anywhere I wanted. And ultimately I chose between the University of Maryland, my mom's alma mater, and Vanderbilt. But it was a no-brainer because I had my sister pushing me out the door, down south to Vanderbilt. But I'm very thankful for that opportunity he gave me for a great education, a memorable experience and friendships that I still cherish today. On this point, we were in agreement to pursue opportunities our way. T is for tough. And as I posted on March 5th, my dad's 89th birthday, there aren't many people tougher than my dad. During his last stay in the hospital, he pulled out his feeding tube 10 times. In the past year, he fell 15 times. But they'd send him back to the hospital for a CAT scan, find out there was no concussion, they'd patch him up, and send him back home. When trying to get a handle on his assets for a recent conversation with his estate attorney, I called the director of sales at Bay Woods, the independent living facility where he's lived for the past few years with my mom. Jim also talked about how tough my dad was and kidded he still has the bruises on his arm to show for the time my dad haggled with him to no end on the sale price of their co-op. While he certainly had a rough side, he was also fair, a trait that many admired in my dad. Though we all had other ideas on how he should have handled these issues, my dad rarely took our advice because he did it his way. K is for knowledge. My dad loved to read, as you hear. He was involved in several book clubs during retirement in Annapolis, his home for the past 27 years. Took advantage of free classes at Anne Arundel Community College so he can learn about new things like memoir writing, computers, and film studies. It's good his interest in the stock market led him to invest wisely. Since I liked the kid, he struck out twice in his life on potential real estate investments. First time, my mom and aunt's parents lived in Mount Pleasant in D.C., and after the riots, he pushed them out to Silver Spring. Well, those homes are now worth over $1 million, and a place that I would love to be living, but so it goes. Secondly, during those trips down to the Outer Banks, Duck was like this distant place, and he couldn't believe that, I don't even know if Corolla existed at that point in time. And he was like, who would live up in Duck? Which is where my wife Marguerite and Meryl and I go just about every year. But traffic was pretty bad back then. When you got to the North Carolina-Virginia border, you could be hours to get down there. Well, you can then make that trip in 4.5 hours because, as we know, times change and things progress. But even if we had encouraged him, as I think we did, to make those investments, we all know by now he was going to do it his way. I is for interested. No matter what your lot in life, my dad expressed an interest in you as a person. Many Fed employees walked by the security guards like they were invisible, but Dad knew each one by name and usually stopped to banter with them. This continued later in life during his time at Bay Woods. Even after being a demanding customer in the dining room to waitstaff, he would endear himself to them after the meal by wanting to know more about the human side of these individuals who really contributed to the fabric of the senior community. It explains why these employees were in tears the past 2 days when they learned of his passings and shared condolences with Lisa. Nobody decided for him who was important. He made that choice himself. Lastly, N is for New Yorker. Despite being gone for 57 years, my dad still sounded like a New Yorker. You'd hear it in his accent when he'd say chocolate. New York is where he learned to be tough on the streets of the Bronx. And again, as you heard, he went to DeWitt Clinton High School. He was an undergrad at City College, law school at Columbia. He did it all on his own. He built a better life through sheer force of will. And as Frank Sinatra sang, and as I hope that you'll all be able to listen to later on tonight or sometime this week, if you can make it there, you'll make it anywhere. And indeed, Bob Plotkin did make it through a good long life by doing it his way. Thank you for listening. Thanks for being family, friends, and thank you for your support to us, my mom and my sister and everyone. And now my cousin Eric, who is like a brother I never had, who is like a second son to my dad, will have a few remarks.
Thank you so much, Rick. Rick and Lisa, those were beautiful eulogies. They really described your father to a T, my uncle. I was very, very fortunate. I was very blessed to have my uncle. We had a very, very special relationship. And as Rick mentioned, I felt like he was like a second father to me. I'm going to do this a little differently than most eulogies. Rather than going into the Unc that way, I want to tell you all a story. And the story is an older story. It goes back probably about 8 or 9 years ago. I was at a funeral with my wife, Gail, and I was struck when I was sitting in the funeral. I was listening to the eulogies. I think it was a friend of ours' mother who had passed. And the eulogies were beautiful. She was a wonderful woman. But what I was struck by was, relating it to myself and to my family, was that I needed to talk to my loved ones that were reaching a senior age and let them know how I felt about them before they passed. It was very important to me. I had an urgency. When we got home from that funeral, I called my uncle. I said, I need to come out and see you. I need to talk to you. He said, of course, come on over. So that weekend I drove out. I always would try to get to Eve and Bob's place just before lunch so that my aunt would feed me. Because she did such a great job. And so I always came out before a meal. And I remember getting there and I sat down, we had lunch, and then after lunch, my uncle looked at me and said, what do you want to talk about? I said, let's go into your study. Let's talk in your study. So we sat down, and I said, Unc, I was at a funeral last weekend, and I don't want to wait until you're dead to tell you what you meant to me. And he was really struck by it. You know, I think he was a little scared at first. And I said, it's important for me to let you know what you've meant to my life. And I told him, you know that you were like a second father to me. But you were more than that. Because over the course of my life, as I aged, I started work, I got married, I had children, I climbed the ladder at work. Well, my relationship with my uncle, and I told him this, it matured and it evolved. He was a second father, but he became a mentor. He became an advisor. He became a confidant. He was a friend. And I could always rely on him to tell me exactly what he thought and to tell me the truth. And we talked for quite a while, and I told him a bunch of stories, and I won't tell you these stories here. We laughed a lot. But going back to what Lisa said, I kind of have this feeling that my uncle is here right now, and he hears all this. And if there's anything my uncle hated, it was repetitive shit. So I don't feel a need to go back over all these stories and tell you all these things. What was really important to me was that I got a chance to tell him that. And I told him that 8, 9 years ago. And I recall he was very, very happy about it. So let me close by saying, first off, Unc, I love you. Sorry. I didn't think I'd be able to get through this. And the memories I have of you, Unc, are just wonderful. And truly, my memories of you will always be a blessing for me. Thank you.
I will be, for fear of falling into the repetitive mess, I'll be careful. But there's in the book of Samuel, the second book of Samuel, when the prophet Samuel is about to die, he tells the people, he says, look, don't remember me for the work I did as a prophet. Remember me for the work I did with the people. And, and I was thinking about that as I was thinking about the Bob that I knew, but also the Bob that you shared with me. And, we heard to some degree many of the stories about how he was quite instrumental in terms of the Fed and what he meant in terms of his contributions to the Fed and to the country. And so on that level, it's really quite remarkable. But I think more we heard about his contributions to his family. And we heard stories from, a nephew and 2 children. But of course, not mentioned quite as much, but certainly mentioned, to some degree, is the husband that he was, Eve, and you shared just about what kind of a loving and lovely husband and marriage, and and I know personally about his capacity to have a temper at times, but also I know about his capacity to be so gentle and so, I also have such, the memories for me are the ones of the kind of like this smile, the side smile that he would, out of the side of his, like he was kind of trying to sneak that smile in to show you that where it was a joke that he was making. And that is such a vivid memory for me as well. Clearly, what he meant to the people that he was around, his family, his friends, his colleagues, that he left quite a lasting impression on so many people. And and I think that, just like the prophet Samuel said, don't remember me, though, for the lawyer that I was, although he was quite an accomplished lawyer. Instead, remember him for the way that he was with the people that he cared so deeply about, and that's you. And I won't, I will hesitate to repeat any of the things, but suffice it to say, I think that we know, because the admonition was strong. Suffice it to say, we have an expression in our tradition, it's Zecher Tzadik Livracha Me Atavi Ad Olam, which means may the memory of a righteous person and a loving person and an honorable person and a caring person, may it always serve as a blessing for us. So there are 2 prayers that we're going to conclude our funeral service with. One is the Kaddish. Well, that's the second of the 2, and the first of the 2 is called El Malei Rachamim. It's a prayer in which we ask God to comfort Bob and to guide him on his journeys. So it's a prayer that we actually personalize for Bob. His Hebrew name was Shepsel ben Tzvi Hirsch Verivka. His parents were Harris and Rhoda. And so for these 2 blessings, if you are capable, I invite you to, or if it's comfortable for you, I invite you to please stand for this. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Et Orim Kezohar HaRakia, Mazhirim Et Nishmat, Shepsel Ben Tzvi Hirsch Verivka, Shalach Lolamo, Bal Rachamim Yastirehu, Beseter Knafav Lolamim, Vitzror Bitzrachim Et Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo, V'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Bob Plotkin. Bob, who was his Hebrew name Shepsel ben Tzvi Hirsch Verivka. Bob, who was the son of Harris and Rhoda, for he has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. And our final prayer is the Kaddish, the mourner's Kaddish, and definitely in your book. It is on page, wait, you don't have to look for it, I could have looked for it. What's that?
2 to 4.
2 to 4. 2 to 4, the Kaddish. Really early. Okay, so please join me. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, V'yalma divrach Cherutei v'yamlich malchutei, V'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechal Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach li'alam u'lamei amayah, Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnasei, V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei Dekudsha B'richu. Le'elah min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiram b'yalma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Yosei shalom b'mrumav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn and comfort to every bereaved heart. And one final expression to you, Bob. Lech ki shachach Adonai, go your way, for God has called you. Lech v'Adonai yeh imach, go your way and may God be with you. V'alach lefanecha tzidkecha kavod Adonai yasvecha, may your righteousness go before you and the glory of God receive you. Amen. So, while that concludes our service, there are a couple more things. First of all, thank you. I know we had almost 70, if not more, people on the recording, and that's really special. And also know that there'll be a Shiva this evening at 7:30. I was trying to remember. 7:30, and the link is in both the instructions for joining both this service as well as the link can be found in an email that was sent by our congregation. The way that we conclude, though, is by placing earth on top of the casket for those who are able, and we can even help Eve do so as well. I ask that the family do so first, or the immediate family, and then after, if anyone would like to participate, please feel free to do so. We can bring a shovel over here if that helps. She doesn't want to. Okay.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can use the shovels on both sides.
This is to you. I will be on tonight. I'll see you if you're on for the Shiva. I'll see you tonight. I'll see you a little bit later. Okay. I'll see you tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, this now concludes the service for Robert Plotkin. Thank you for coming.
Lisa's eulogy. English major. Comes natural.
El malei rachamim, shochen bamromim, hametzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashechina. Im kedoshim et orim kezohar harakia, mazhirim et nishmat Shepsel ben Tzvi Hirsch v'Rivka, Shalach lo lamo, bal rachamim yastirehu b'seter knafav lo lamim, v'yitzror b'tzorachayim et nishmato.